goal of this section in the course is to be able to create an internal structure for the noun phrase, these two very strong friends in my first apartment. I'm telling you right now it's a noun phrase, but we'll learn about that in this section. I'm going to learn about all the different word categories and how they group together. First, thinking back about constituents from the introduction section, what is the structure of this going to be like? Let's do some replacement tests. So if I say these two very strong friends in my first apartment, can I do some sort of replacement? These two, I think very strong. I'm going to try replacing with an adjective. So these two happy friends in my first apartment. This seems to be fine. So yeah, that's going to be some sort of phrase. These two very strong friends in my first apartment. We can say these two very strong friends there. These two very strong friends in there is going to be okay too. And what about these two very strong friends in my apartment? These two very people? These two very it? These two very he? But looks like that's not going to be one. So in terms of the structure, we have our big phrase here that covers the entire thing. Very strong is going to be its own little phrase. My first apartment is going to be its own little phrase, its own little constituent, and so is in my first apartment. So we're going to get this kind of structure that I'd rather just show you visually. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have a big phrase that collects all of these things. These two, very strong as a unit, friends in my first apartment as a unit, and my first apartment as a unit. So we're going to fill this out throughout the section. But first, how do we determine a category? You might be thinking meaning, because that's typically what you learn in school. Noun is a person, place, or thing. That's great, but there's going to be problems. We need to take a look at meaning, form, and distribution. What is the meaning? What can attach to the word? In other words, what form does the word take? And where does it appear? All three of these things are crucial. So, if we categorize according to meaning, we have problems. Because with nouns, we have abstract things too. And that might not be caught. We also have problems with prototypes. So when you think about these categories of verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and you think about their meanings, there's a general meaning you get. Like adjectives or attributes or qualities. So when you think of a word like love, love feels more like an attribute or quality, or maybe even an action. But it could be a noun depending on where it is in the sentence. So love can be a noun, it can be a verb. It's going to depend, but love doesn't really fit that noun prototype. In some words, it's just really hard to come up with definitions based on meaning. So a word like wrong as well, it doesn't have just one category. It's going to depend on the meaning. So wrong rarely prospers. Wrong here is acting as a noun. You wrong me and I'll sue you. That's a verb. The tourist took the wrong road. This is an adjective. This is now describing the road. And Edward often spells words wrong. This is how the spelling is done. It's an adverb. So it's going to depend on context. So meaning can't just get you the word category on its own. Form is a pretty decent one to look at. So for instance, you know that with something like a noun, it can always take a possessive S. So Doug versus dogs, dog versus dogs, sheep versus sheeps. But this doesn't apply for everything. So for example, with the suffix eyes, if we want to take the word crystal, we can make the word crystal eyes. But we can't take a word like book and make book eyes. That's just not going to work. Therefore, form can help in some cases, but it's not the most useful, especially because English has so many different affixes, so many different ways we can change words. It's hard to really tell. The last one, distribution. This is going to be very important for us. This is the environment of the word. So if a word appears after the, probably a noun. If a word appears after he wants to, that word after is probably a verb. So we can use frames or slots in order to help us figure out the word category. But it might not always work because sometimes, even within the same category, slots don't work nicely. The example here is she bought the tofu versus she bought the ambiguity. Both are going to be nouns, but she bought the ambiguity sounds weird. So we're going to use all three of these in order to figure out how to do word categories as we go throughout all of the sections. The first category we're going to learn is adjectives, and this is going to modify or describe objects, so nouns. So if we can ask a question like, let's say I have a pizza and I ask myself, well, what kind of pizza do I have? I can describe it with an adjective. I have a moldy pizza. What kind of sweater do I have? I have a green sweater. What kind of unicorn do I have? I have a colorful unicorn. These are all describing the adjective. So usually in English, we see the adjective appearing right before the thing that it is describing, and we will label these as ADJ. So in terms of distribution, let's say you have a noun. I just like to pick a pretty standard noun that I always use. So I like to pick the word dog. If we can put a word before dog in between the, then we're probably looking at an adjective. You could say the happy dog was here, or the red dog, or the starving dog, or something like that. Adjective might also appear after a be verb like was. So the noun was, or the noun is, or the nouns are. And you can put an adjective in here too. So the noun was, what's another one? Quiet. We have to be a little bit careful though, because not everything that we put after the word was is going to be an adjective, but we can use this as a sort of test. So the reason we have two different adjective positions is because we have different types of adjectives. We have attributive adjectives and predicative adjectives. When you have an attributive adjective, it means that the adjective comes before the noun. So the magical magician. Magical is describing magician. Maine Coons are large cats. Large is describing the cat. So these are the standard adjectives you think of. The predicative ones are a bit different. So these follow either a be verb or a linking verb. So these are verbs of perception. So felt, looks, tastes. We'll get some more information about verb types when we get to the last section in this online course. But these connect the subject and the description. So you can almost think of these like an equal sign. James Franco's performance felt unnatural. James Franco's performance equals unnatural. This Tim Hortons donut looks old. This Tim Hortons donut equals old. We can use that sort of test to find a predicative adjective. We say it's predicative because it's in the predicate. So you can now identify that this is James Franco's performance felt unnatural. Unnatural's in the predicate. This Tim Hortons donut looks old. Looks old is the predicate. The adjective is in the predicate. There's some adjectives that can only be used attributively. So we can say the mere linguist, but we can't say the linguist was mere. This doesn't make sense. It's ungrammatical. And there's a few words in English that work like this. You'd have to look online to find a list. Some adjectives can only be used predicatively, but I've heard people say these before, so it's not that weird to me. The clown was alone would be standard. Most people don't say the alone clown, but if someone said that to me, it wouldn't be weird. So, try some adjective identification. You can pause the video. I want you to identify the adjective, state whether it's attributive or predicative, and there could be multiple adjectives back to back. So pause the video and try it yourself. So, the first one, man is the most intelligent of animals and the silliest. I see intelligent. So this is an adjective that is going to be describing man, and it's occurring after the predicate. So is after, sorry, not, it's within the predicate, it's after the verb of the predicate is. So this is going to be a predicative adjective. So the most intelligent of the animals and the silliest. So silliest is going to be doing the same thing here. It is also describing man. So this is going to be an adjective that is predicative. So the first one, a little bit more challenging than something I could have given you. Okay. Walking with a friend in the pitch dark. So pitch here is describing dark. So this is being an adjective. Now you might think dark is an adjective here too, but it's actually a noun, and we're going to see why a little bit later. But essentially, whenever you see the word the, this has to connect with some sort of noun afterwards. Okay. It's better than walking alone in the light, so we don't have any more adjectives there. I know what we just saw before. Alone, the alone clown. But this one is describing an action. It's describing a gerund. So this is more like an adverb in this case. It's describing how the walking is being done. The walking is being done alone. So this is actually going to be an adverb, which we'll learn about in the next section. So I have no unique special talent. I am only passionately curious. So unique is describing talent, and so is special. So both of these are just going to be adjectives, and these are both going to be attributive adjectives because they occur before talent. I am only passionately curious. So curious is also going to be another adjective here. It's predicative, and it is describing I. It's appearing after a linking verb like am or a be verb like am. So if you have any questions, you know where to put them in the course down there. But this is how we can identify basic adjectives. Now we're going to take a look at adjective phrases, but first just a quick reminder about constituents. Constituents are groups of words that act together as a unit, and the phrase is the smallest of those clusters. We need at least one word, and we're going to start with about 5 of these and then get into more advanced ones later. We're going to have the noun phrase, the verb phrase, the adjective phrase, the adverb phrase, and the prepositional phrase. I'm going to introduce these, building up the sentence. So by the end of these sections, you'll understand why the approach I'm taking is going to work for our structure. We're not going to do all the categories, then all the phrases. We're going to go so that way we can follow a flow. So we just learned about adjectives. Now let's learn about adjective phrases. So adjective phrases is a group of words, usually just one word, that is built around an adjective head. This means whenever we have a sentence and we have a word in that sentence that's labeled as an adjective, it will build up into its own phrase. So let's say I am looking at a sentence and I see those words. I see alone and I see clown. What this means is that alone is going to be an adjective and it's going to build up into its own phrase. And you might think, well, why do we need that if it's just one word? Well, that's because we have a new word category that we can have in our adjective phrase, and these are called qualifiers. So these are in a fixed position, and they ask about the quantity of some adjective or adverb. So, for example, I saw the horribly deadly snake in the Amazon. So deadly is the adjective there, and horribly is telling you how deadly it is. Or the old pub is somewhat busy. Busy is the adjective, and somewhat is describing how busy it is. That penguin is ridiculously cute. Cute is the adjective, ridiculously is the qualifier that is telling you how cute it is. So these are all examples of qualifiers, and we can tell by the position. Its function is to specify the quantity of some adjective, and it always appears right before the adjective. So within the adjective phrase, we can fit in these qualifiers as part of it. So basically, you can think of it this way. If you have two nodes that are side by side, so we call these sisters or siblings, they describe each other in some way. So qualifier in this case is the modifier that is describing the adjective. So extremely happy, super sad, quite discontent. But these are our units or our words that function together as a unit. So again, in this last sentence, you are super awesome, but you already knew that. Super is telling you how awesome it is. You got to remember, super can also just be an adjective. You are super. The super person came. So we have to be careful about position. In this case, super is a qualifier. But, and I'll put this here just so we can see this explicitly and write this out. So I'm just going to say the super dog. If we say this super would then be an adjective. So position matters. So let's see if you can find the adjectives in these sentences and draw the adjective phrases. So if there's a qualifier, you can pause the video, try it yourself. I'll go over the solutions now. He reeled in his line and discovered the catch was actually a soaked wallet containing $2,000 cash. So the only thing we actually have here is soaked. This is going to be our adjective, and this would build into an adjective phrase. Okay. Denny ended up gifting Halsa a personalized cooler. So we have another adjective here that would build up into an adjective phrase, and taking his family out to dinner as thanks. I don't see any other adjectives there. What was not reported was the excruciatingly absurd notion. So there's an adjective there that wallets can't be stolen. We're going to ignore be stolen there because there's a couple of ways we can interpret that. But what I do see here is I see a qualifier, excruciatingly. This is telling us how absurd it is. It's excruciatingly absurd. So if we were to draw a tree of this, we'd have an adjective phrase. And because we have an adjective phrase, we're going to need an adjective head. And then we'd have a qualifier coming to its left. So this would be excruciatingly absurd. I'm just going to abbreviate the words just for space. So that's identifying our adjectives here. And if we take a look at our structure so far for this section, these two very strong friends in my first apartment, we're now able to tackle the very strong portion. And we can see that those are going to build up into an adjective phrase.